Hey Year 12s, today I'm going to show you how to create a logical, cohesive essay. I call it the 5C structure. Everyone loves a nice, easy way to remember these things, so hopefully it's something that you'll be able to write down on the top of your sack later this term, to give you a bit of guidance as you're writing. I want to start by having a look at the exam criteria. These are the top three ranges, what examiners are looking for to award scores of 7, 8, 9 or 10. And these are things that really guide us when we're designing the things that we teach you and preparing you for the exams later in the year through the SACs. Feel free to pause to have a full read, but I'm going to draw your attention to the parts I've highlighted here. In orange, we've got parts of the criteria that focus on the ideas and the issues explored in the texts. We see this reference to conceptual complexity. This term is basically referring to the quality and depth of understanding that you have about an idea, and the extent to which you can explore the complexities of these ideas in your essays. An essay that tells me that secrets are important isn't very complex. An essay that tells me that there's a lot of secrets in both of these towns, again, isn't very complex. But an essay that tells me that secrets are caused by both communities' need to repress their desires out of fear of being persecuted and excluded by their peers, that, on the other hand, is a little bit more complicated and a little bit more conceptually complex. In the green, we see these references to structure and the implications of the topic. With this comparative essay, there is a very clear expectation that students write paragraphs that develop a clear line of argument, that what you start with builds carefully and develops into something far more insightful. The 2019 Examiner's Report addressed this as well. There was a strong emphasis on the value of being able to write about the ideas and to conceptualize how the authors grapple with these ideas throughout their texts and between their texts even. The report also stressed the importance of progressively exploring the ideas in the essay questions, building arguments that move into complex analysis of the texts. And finally, we have the 2020 Meet the Assessors report. The assessors reiterated the importance of focusing on ideas, exploring the complexity of those ideas, and doing so throughout your essay in a highly structured way. In summary, you need to focus on the ideas and issues presented in the topic. Every sentence in your essay should add to your analysis of the ideas presented there. Make sure you explore these ideas in depth. Examine the nuances, the complexities, and the implications of them. There's no way that you're going to be able to do all of this in 15 minutes come November, let alone at the end of this term. So you need to be doing the groundwork through your classwork and through your own private study. You have to consistently address the ideas throughout the essay. Make sure you don't go off on a tangent to write about how Teddy is hotter than JP. And lastly, sequence and carefully structure your essay in a highly logical way. Don't let your examiner get lost. And this means we need to add an extra layer of thinking to our writing. There's two layers that you're already very much aware of. We call this top layer the macro structure. It's the broad, general structure that you're familiar with. This is your intro, your body paragraphs, and your conclusion. Pretty much every single essay you write is going to have this structure. Then we have the bottom layer, which we can call the micro structure. This is your paragraph structure, and again, most of you will be pretty familiar with them. Your intro has a contention and an outline of your arguments. Your body paragraphs usually follow some version of TL or at least use bits of it. And your conclusion probably restates your contention and restates your arguments. It should draw some actual conclusions, maybe some kind of final moment of insight, but often that's missed in the rush of actually writing. So what's in this middle space? Well, this middle layer is all about your ideas, and we can refer to it as the mesostructure. You're actually probably pretty familiar with some of these. You might start your body paragraphs with your strongest idea, and then follow it up with your second strongest, and then finish with your weakest. Or maybe you take the cover all bases approach, Write one paragraph about characters, another about literary devices, and another about themes. Surely that'll hit all the criteria with the finesse of a shotgun. Or maybe you present your first argument and then add another argument that adds to that, before adding a final paragraph that's sort of a however, an exception. They all work, but we could probably do a little bit more to craft that sense of cohesion and drive that will really appeal to examiners. This is where the 5 C's come in: contention, causes, circumstances, consequences, and conclusion. It's a structure that can help you focus on the ideas presented in a topic and take them in a clear direction, while still giving you some freedom to explore other related ideas and issues. The 5 C's structure is a way of thinking about the texts you're studying. It gives you a map to follow as you're unpacking the ideas in preparation for writing. Obviously, we're always going to have a topic with our comparative responses. So that's our first thing that we need to have in mind. But then we need to consider, well, what situations does this topic enable us to explore? If the topic gives us the idea of revenge, then we need to look at the situations in The Crucible and The Dressmaker that involve characters' quests for revenge. Or we need to look at those people who are impacted by revenge. If the idea is lies and deceit, well, let's focus on the moments of dishonesty and deception throughout these texts and how that affects people. Remember, you don't need to write about everything in the texts, so finding a focus is crucial. We're going to start by asking a really simple question. What causes these situations? And because we're writing comparatively, we're going to be looking at how these causes are similar or different. And to really move into that conceptual complexity that examiners want, we're going to try to examine who or what is responsible for these causes. What were their intentions? Why did they cause these things to happen even? Then we're going to analyze the circumstances in more detail. How do characters actually experience these situations and experience these ideas? Is there any change in these circumstances or the way they feel towards them? And if so, who's responsible or what's responsible? We can even take it as a moment to reflect on how the authors represent the situations and the ideas. Is it as a positive thing or is it as a negative thing? And then we can move on to the consequences. What are the major changes that occur in the text because of these situations? What is the significance or the extent of them? Are they short-term or are they long-term? And what are the reasons for them, perhaps? And now that you've got a sort of process developed, a series of moments that you progress through, we can take a step back and look at it as a whole. And this enables us to present a much more nuanced contention, a fuller answer to the prompt. And we can draw some legitimate conclusions, some actual lessons or insights from the text that we can present at the end of our essay. Overall, it gives us an essay that is cohesive, bound from top to bottom by the consistent exploration of a very focused look at the idea. Let's do a really quick example with this topic. Sometimes things just don't seem fair. From The Dressmaker. Compare how The Crucible and The Dressmaker explore injustice. So, injustice stands out as the core idea here. It's mentioned explicitly in the statement at the bottom. It's referred to in the quote. It's obviously what we need to pay attention to. But the quote also reminds us that sometimes things don't seem fair. So we need to consider when they do seem fair. Once we start doing this, we use the 5C structure to guide our thinking and the types of questions we ask. We keep the essay topic at the forefront of our mind. The topic's asking us to discuss situations in which characters and communities confront injustice. So let's start by looking for the causes of this injustice or the causes of this unfairness. Well, sometimes it's the power imbalance, that inequality that we see in both communities and the social exclusion that comes with it. We might write about Tituba being accused of witchcraft because of her race or because of her position as a slave. We might discuss Abigail's decision or her kind of desire to take power as a way of seeing the power imbalance between young people and a kind of entrenched older generation in Salem, or between younger unmarried women and the rest. And in Dressmaker, we might see Molly's and Tilly's exclusion as something similar. Women being excluded because they're not married, because they lead some kind of independence that kind of doesn't fit or doesn't conform to the expectations of the rest of their town. And then we're going to start kind of moving into this conceptual complexity. Who's responsible for these things? Is it class and status? Is it their race? Is it their gender that's responsible? It might be a combination, and we might touch on that. What are the intentions of the people or the groups that are kind of enforcing those things? You know, we have a lot of men, we have a lot of male leaders in both communities who seek to reinforce societal norms of class, of race, of gender, because they're trying to uphold a patriarchal society. And then we move on. What are the circumstances? Well, we see some very unfair punishment for these women, often for the crimes and sins of others. We've got numerous victims of the witch trials that stem from Abigail's quest for vengeance, yet her lies are never exposed, and that seems pretty unfair to me. Tilly and Molly, on the other hand, they suffer though they've done nothing wrong at all. The most despicable members of their societies end up leading relatively peaceful lives for most of their texts. They're obviously embroiled in each other's lives, but no one seriously harmed or seriously suffers as much as Tilly and Molly at first glance, perhaps. If we look at these experiences in more detail, we can see that it's an experience of oppression, it's an experience of exclusion and victimization that links them all together. They change, though, for some characters. Abigail sort of escapes these circumstances by manipulating those around her, reinforcing injustice by becoming the one that perpetrates it. And they're kind of represented in pretty poor ways. We're meant to pity those who face injustice, people like Tilly and Molly, Tituba even, but those like Paris, those like Danforth, those like Abigail who end up perpetuating that injustice, well, we are supposed to condemn them quite harshly. Hopefully at this point you're starting to see how using this kind of map leads us to thinking about different factors or different aspects of the idea and the situations that they kind of are represented through. We've got consequences. Tilly seeks revenge. Dungatar's burned to the ground. Okay, Tilly faces all of this injustice, all of this unfairness, and even though she's trying to make amends for her guilt and make amends for her past that she doesn't really need to make up for, she eventually reaches a breaking point. Okay, and Tilly kind of achieves justice, at least a poetic justice, by burning the town to the ground. Salem, similarly, is ruined, but that ruin inspires rebellion, and theocracy is broken. It remains unjust almost until the end, and the justice doesn't come for the characters, it comes for society at large. The theocracy that was so unjust is undone by its own injustices. What were the consequences? And why were they significant? Well, Miller uses these consequences or uses this situation we see at the end of both texts as a damning critique of McCarthyism, of the situation that he saw in his own life in the 50s in America. Dressmaker, on the other hand, it offers a sort of idealized story of vengeance, where the wronged are righted. Perhaps not as realistic as what we might see in The Crucible, but nevertheless something that we can feel satisfied by at the end. So now that we've got all this kind of collected together, what's our contention going to be, and what conclusions can we draw? My contention is going to be that the texts condemn injustice created through inequality. Okay, it's not particularly complex a contention, but it's an answer that I can then explore throughout the essay and present some really rich conclusions about. In the crucible, audiences are left with a sense that those that perpetuate injustice often go unpunished, while Dressmaker leaves us with the hope that justice can in fact be achieved through burning vengeance. I'm going to finish by taking a quick look back at the exam criteria, particularly the one for 8 marks. While this 5C structure is by no means the only structure, I am saying that it's a very strong structure to help you show a competent grasp of the ideas and the issues in your essays. By analysing the causes and the consequences of situations in the texts and the circumstances that surround them, you will be writing about the processes and relationships between them that underpin these texts. And in doing so, you'll be leading your examiners through an essay that follows an exceptionally straightforward and highly logical structure that has a clear purpose all the way through.